And this is episode 47 of the Lifestyle Entrepreneur Podcast. And I'm excited for my next guest, who's Abel James, who's going to be talking about how to create your dream lifestyle. Welcome to the Lifestyle Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Kris Gilbertson, and I'm a best-selling author, podcast expert, and speaker and business strategist. And this is the podcast to give you real tactical strategies to implement from today's top lifestyle entrepreneurs on what's working for them in their business that you can take and turn around and implement right away for yours as well. Now, in order to get the most from the podcast, make sure to join us over at www.lifestyleacademy.com/free bonus and enter your name and email to get your free cheat sheet on the top 10 podcast tools to launch your world-class podcast today, and also receive cliff notes from the top lifestyle entrepreneurs on the podcast with their exact step-by-step formulas for success for your business delivered right to your inbox. And now for some monthly housekeeping items. I get to announce the First Friday raffle. And this month's First Friday winner goes out to A.G. Agliano. And they say, I love the diversity of topics, 5 stars. The guest interview are amazing. And Kris is just the person to do the interview. The topics she covers in her interviews are diverse and very useful for any entrepreneur or those entrepreneur gonna-bees. Keep up the great work, Kris. I'm so glad I found this podcast. Well, we're so glad that you found us as well. Great to have you here, and you're going to love this next episode with Abel, where he talks health, fitness, software, apps, a whole bunch more on how to create that dream lifestyle. So let's get at it. So welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for today's guest. His name is Abel James, and he's a modern-day Renaissance man. So Abel is a #1 best-selling author. He's a top 10 app developer, award-winning talk show host, and a serial entrepreneur. So Abel's work's been featured all over the place in Wired, Magazine, Paleo Living, on hundreds of media outlets, probably almost every podcast that you listen to. And what's great about Abel is that he's the host of the wildly popular Fat Burning Man show, and he has been rated the #1 podcast in health and fitness the past 2 years running. So it's an incredible podcast. Definitely want to check that out. And he's also, what's great about Abel, he's got a really unique story and a really unique way of delivering how he can coach you in health and fitness. But not only that, he's worked with top corporations, Fortune 500 and federal government clients, including Microsoft, State Street Global Advisors, Lockheed Martin, and the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. And he's advised all of these companies. So he really is the Renaissance man. So I'm excited to bring Abel on today, and we're going to cover a lot of different areas to help you in your business and crafting your lifestyle business. So Abel, welcome. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Kris.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It was so great to connect with you. And so I'd love for you just to talk about your story and really how you got into the health and fitness industry, because I think your story is so unique on what you were able to discover and the revelations you've made that have helped so many, hundreds and thousands of others transform their life as well.
Yeah, totally. So for me, I've always really wanted to be high performance, the best that I possibly could be with anything that I do, and also very headstrong. So growing up, I didn't like to listen to my parents and what they recommended and that sort of thing. So, it was my dad constantly serving steak dinners that turned me vegetarian eventually. And so I went down that path for a while. And I learned a lot about nutrition, although it was the normal way that most people learn about nutrition, which is from magazines, books, some research, but not necessarily the right kinds.
Kinds.
Primarily my doctors. And so I kind of like outsourced my health to them. And we had a history, or have a history, I should say, of thyroid problems and high blood pressure and some other things that are fairly common, especially in America, but didn't used to be. But now they're kind of like called genetic by most doctors. And so, I went through college and eventually started working in DC as a strategy consultant. And then eventually that brought me to Austin, and I was working like 3 jobs at the same time, totally stressed out, and didn't really have time to worry about health in terms of like looking at cutting edge research and paying attention to every little thing that's happening in my body. And what I found is that I was losing energy, putting on weight, and suddenly experiencing a lot of problems. And every time I went to the doctor, I was a little bit fatter, a little bit sicker, and they would say, eat less, exercise more. So it got to the point where I was eating very, very little, almost no fat, like zero dietary cholesterol, and my biomarkers were through the roof. I had a spare tire. My face was completely inflamed. I had all sorts of problems. Couldn't really sleep at night. It all came to a head when one night I came home in Austin and my apartment building was up in a 30-foot wall of flames and just lost everything.
Oh no.
So it was at that point that the rest of my life was just an absolute mess, and staring literally right back at me in the mirror was my fat, inflamed face. And I'm just like, well, clearly this isn't working. If my doctor says that whatever I'm going to try is going to kill me, then whatever. At this point, I might as well just take that leap, because this clearly isn't doing it. Because in my early 20s, I was falling apart. Had high blood pressure, had all these problems, and so as soon as I kind of took that leap of faith and really spent the time making that my own pet project to move me through, that period of adjustment and disaster that I was going through, I found that basically I was doing everything wrong. And the things that I was doing that were supposed to be helping me stay healthy were the things that were in fact making me sick. So as soon as I kind of like flipped that switch and started eating my own way instead of my doctor's way, 20 pounds came off in just over a month, and all of these problems that I thought were a part of like who I was and getting older, like not being able to sleep at night, like a lot of that burp back feeling after you eat a meal, and just that sluggishness after meals, and so many other things, even acne and dry skin, pretty much just went away without me doing anything or expecting it at all. It just kind of happened. And I was just like, other people deserve to know this, This is something that's not hard. It's not difficult. It's relatively straightforward. It's just there's so much misinformation out there that it's easy for people to get tricked into following the wrong advice. And so I want to take people who were where I was and bring them to where I am now, which is it's an awesome place.
Yeah, I love that. So is this really what you got into the wild diet and really developed this whole plan?
Yeah. So that's when basically I made the plan for myself originally. I'm just like, this is what I need to do. These are the things that I've tried. This hasn't worked. This has. And all the things that worked stuck. And then I started doing it, with my friends and family, many of whom, lost a lot of weight. It was so cool. My dad was, he's since his 30s had a hard time keeping weight off. And, he was pushing 200s. We're only 5'9", so we're not that big. So he was up in the 200s and always kind of had a spare tire and some extra stuff going on. And it's been about 3 or 4 years now that he's been about like 165, just no problem, piece of cake. Still drinks beer, still has bread sometimes, and like still loves his sweets. Like he'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like scooping maple syrup into his mouth, and mom will catch him. He's just like typical dad. But it's once you get the hang of this, it really does work, and you just go back to that not normal, not American normal, but the healthy normal that we're all supposed to be.
Right. So I know a lot of the shows you're on, you guys get really into the technical details with the health and fitness, but I want to keep it a little bit easier for people, because I know for me, and I know my listeners are just like me, it goes over our head and we just get all confused, and it's another frustration point. So I'd love for you to just kind of break down maybe the top 3 things to focus on to really help people set them into the right course of action to get moving and to really start to change their lifestyle.
Cool. So number 1, make it your priority, because a lot of people say that it's their priority, but like it's not actually. So make sure that this is actually something that you want. Envision what you'll look like, what your life will be like, because you don't want a 6-pack, or you don't, if you're a woman, want a 6-pack either.
Right.
Which like a lot of women are after these days. What you want is to be happy and healthy and have good energy. So like make sure that that's your goal, how you feel, not necessarily how you look, because how you look comes second. Like once you feel great, you'll start to look great too. Number 2, always focus on the quality of your food as opposed to the quantity of food. There is so much junk out there about calories and counting. And the truth of the matter is that unless I'm doing an experiment on myself, I'm not counting anything. And most healthy people who I know are not counting anything either. It's the people who struggle with their weight who are counting. And it's just such a huge mental tax. If there's anything worth counting, and we can get to this in point 3, it's probably at first for people carbs or sugar. you want to make sure that that's down. You always want to pay attention to those because they can really hijack your health. So number 3, it would be in terms of the way that you're eating. You should be eating the way that humans have been eating for a very long time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be paleo or ancestral. Those are terms that are catching on recently. They're a little more specific than what I'm talking about. But the way that we used to eat as humans is a heck of a lot of veggies, especially green fibrous veggies, all real food, not chemicals or other junk. So avoiding all of that is an absolute must. And then eating plenty of protein, not being afraid of red meat or meat in general. Eating plenty of eggs and other foods like that, especially if you're kind of in between vegan, vegetarian, and a meat eater. Eggs can be a great option for people who are just getting started with this. And really not being afraid of fat is a huge one. I get 60, sometimes 80% of my calories from fat straight up, and my biomarkers have never been better. I've never had better energy. And so being afraid of fat is something that is way out of control, especially in America. And there are certain types of fat that are bad, but if you're eating real food almost 100% of the time, then you really don't have to worry about the specifics or the science or anything like that. Just focus on eating high quality, real food that was recently alive and well, and that will translate to your own body too.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So do you focus specifically in your diet where a lot of people tell you this much protein, this much fat, this much carb, like because you just said 60%, comes from fat. And a lot of people, I know for me, you hear, oh no, limit your fat, keep that down, or there's just a lot of misconceptions around there. So do you find that that's the same with men and women, how you set that up, or is a little bit different?
It's pretty similar. Fat is really, really important for women as well. The brain is primarily made up of fat. And so if you want to feel great and think in a really powerful way, that's always been my main goal, is not to necessarily have the body of my dreams, but to have the mind of my dreams. So fat is absolutely essential, literally, for that. So people don't need to be afraid of anything. The thing that you need to be afraid of is like Crisco and trans fats and other, like, how do you get a solid fat from a vegetable? Things like that don't make any sense. So if it doesn't make any sense, then stay away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's funny too, all the puns on the marketing today where they say, just random natural things, but then they're just, fat free or this. And it's just so, it doesn't make any sense.
Water, yeah.
Yeah, so you're just like, what is going on? So I think that's brilliant. So what makes your diet different than what else is out on the marketplace? Anything very specifically unique?
Yeah, so I would say most of the diets out there are, they're not really in the diet business. They're in the food service business. So when you sign up for a diet, you have to buy their requisite foods, and that's where they make their money. That's why they're in business. They're in business to sell those little bars, those protein shakes, and all the rest of it. So straight up, that differentiates me from probably 80 or 90% of the other diets out there. And aside from that, if you're talking about paleo or ancestral or Weston A. Price or real food or farm to table, all the rest of it, all these things, even bodybuilding type diets and fitness model type diets, all these things are very, very similar. They've worked for a really, really long time. Anyone who says that there's something cutting edge or brand new in their dietary approach is either deluding you or themselves, because in terms of human health, our bodies function in a particular way. And when you give our bodies the nutrients that it requires, then it totally rocks out and it can put up with more than you'd expect. So for me, it's more about the communication of how do you work this into your lifestyle. So the wild diet is very simple. I can explain it in the way that I just did, which is just like, eat real food, don't worry about it. So wild diet versus paleo, actually my approach is a lot more lenient than something like paleo is, because there are a lot of foods that don't work well with my own body that are 100% paleo. I have my own individual food sensitivities. Everybody does. So that's a piece of my approach as well. You have to not just follow some arbitrarily dogmatic scheme of what to eat every day and count everything. It's more about fiddling with it, finding what works for you, finding your favorite foods, eating those, and then getting other foods in there that really fill in all the gaps in your nutrition to come up with your own plan that you can call whatever you want. You can call it the wild diet if you want, But that's really the key to all of this, is becoming your own guru. So that's what I try to teach other people.
Yeah, and that's something you can't outsource. You can't have a doctor figure out. You really do have to take full control. It's one of those areas in our life. And I think that's brilliant. And I think one thing I want you to talk about, though, is entrepreneurs. I think a lot of us, and I know I've struggled with this, is I don't put health priority first. I put my business and I put what I'm doing and, other things first. And I've seen that a lot with other entrepreneurs as well. So I'd love for you to talk about more of that entrepreneurial lifestyle, because, what you just talked about, when you're eating well and your mind's working well, everything just seems to operate better. So just kind of maybe some life hacking tips when people, especially the ground floor entrepreneurs, because that's when you're in it and it's, every day. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, we have a lot of advantages. And I think that it's really important as entrepreneurs that we take full advantage of those. So what I mean by that is, for example, my community manager has never really done this before. She's been working remotely from New Hampshire. I'm in Texas for about over a year now. And she's just like, you know what? I kind of want to go to a retreat or do something. And I'm just like, you know what? You should take advantage of this, because this is one of the only jobs in the world where you can work from anywhere. So she decided to go to Belize, and that's where she is right now.
Nice.
And all you need is Wi-Fi and maybe a phone connection, but that's just about it. And you can do pretty much anything that you would otherwise do from down there. So, I mean, I've worked from Thailand, from Brazil, on the beach, in the mountains, anywhere. Like, do that, because going out in nature, going on adventures it recharges you. And being stuck, cooped up in an office building is something that, to me, is just absolutely horrible. I've lived that life. I never want to go back. I don't want to put my own employees through that either. So I would say, as entrepreneurs, it's really important to focus on taking advantage of that adventure. So even if you're traveling, like, rent a car, drive around for a little, stay for a couple extra days. That's what we just did in Florida, and it was a blast. We found all sorts of adventures that we weren't expecting. So that's kind of like a general thing. Waking up without an alarm is something that's really nice. You can, as opposed to other people who have to get up at 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 8, whatever. If you need that extra sleep and you need to perform better, then get that extra sleep, because that will help you perform. That's like not a really sexy thing, but if you do it, I just slept for 10 hours last night and I really needed it, and I feel amazing today. So take advantage of little things like that, because it's easy to say, well, I have 3 million things to do. There's no way I can sleep in. That's not true. I can show you my to-do list if you want, but it's just pages and pages, and that's always going to be true. You're never going to be caught up with any of this. So embrace the things that you love right now, because that will help you perform better. So one of the things I do in the morning is I have what's called the super cheesy hour of power, but I put it there. I'm untouchable during that time. Like, no one can schedule meetings. I don't check email. All I'm doing is like a very quick, like 60-second workout, showering, getting ready for the day, generally speaking, taking the dog on a nice walk, meditating, and doing a couple of other little things that help me get ready. Like, I have a gratitude journal that I write in, and having that hour, like, people say, well, I don't have an extra hour of the day to do that. Well, those same people are probably burning an extra 4 to 6 hours that day playing Angry Birds or on Facebook, on Twitter, or reading CNN or something else stupid, or just like chatting at the water cooler and not doing their work because they are bored and because they're not like leading that life that's fulfilling. But if you do all that stuff in the morning, then you already have that behind you, and it's an amazing feeling. Have you read Eat That Frog?
Yes.
Oh, it's so good.
Yep, it is. Good. It is. It's a brilliant book. Brilliant.
So it kind of follows that principle. I just read that the other day, but I've been doing this for a while. And it all goes back to when Mark Twain said, for those of you who haven't read it, if you're going to eat a frog, make sure it's the first thing that you do that day, because then you can feel comfortable knowing that that was the worst thing that will possibly happen to you that day. So
I love it. It's brilliant because it gets you going and gets it done. And I love what you're talking about with the morning ritual, because I know from my corporate days, and I know my mindset used to be like, because I was working 6 days a week, traveling, and then trying to build a business on the day I'm home. And I'm like, I literally don't have any time. But when I started to put that into practice and having my own time, it's amazing what happens and how you can set your day and when you don't do that. So I think it's brilliant. I mean, it seems so simple, but it's a huge, just a mental focus.
Yeah.
I know how many of us wake up.
A huge part of that, which I feel responsible to say at this point, which is I always plan out what I'm going to do that day. I have two to-do lists. One's kind of like this huge master list, and another one is like the 5 to 7 things that must be done today. And it's on a little notepad. And so planning that out ahead of time is extraordinarily important. And that's part of my morning ritual too.
Yeah. Are you a pen and paper type of person?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I spend like half my day literally pen to paper.
Yep. Yep. I like the old school stuff. I've tried all the electronic stuff, but I think, yeah, I love the master list because that's it. I mean, and you really nailed that where people, we feel like we have all this stuff to do and it's always going to be there no matter what. We're always going to have the next thing to figure out and put together or do.
Yeah.
So keeping it simple and giving yourself that time back, I think is brilliant. So let's talk about more of what you've created for your own lifestyle business and how you've been able to put this all together. So how did this all start? Was it with your first information product? And, how did you start to develop that and really put the whole systems in place so you can travel now and do what you want to do?
Yeah. One thing that's kind of crazy is that I didn't even realize this until a couple of months ago. But when I was 15 years old, we didn't have cable television. So I needed to find something to do. And we always had old instruments like laying around the house. And so I learned how to play all of them and then recorded a CD of me playing all the instruments and then sold that online. Yeah. And so that was like my first foray into like online marketing. And that was when I was, like 14, 15 years old in the 90s before it was really a thing. And then I bought and sold stuff on eBay for a while and like repaired electronics. So I've always had that like scrappy ground up mentality that is a lot of fun once you embrace it. And so for me, I kind of did a similar thing with the whole health deal. And I was a consultant, like you said, for Fortune 500s and the government. And the short story is that one thing that happens in consulting all the time is you work on a project that you're really excited about. That's wonderful work. And then the client shakes your hand and says, thank you very much. They put it on a shelf and it's never seen by anyone ever, never used. And so that happened after we did great work on one particular project that could have helped a lot of kids. And that just killed me. It was like a knife to the heart when that happened. I realized that we couldn't help these kids. In fact, I couldn't even talk to them because of like the bureaucracy of all this stuff. So I was just like, enough of that. I need to figure out something else that, isn't necessarily the top down, but maybe the more bottom up approach to help change the world. Cause that's always what I've wanted to do. And so I started I guess I wrote my book first. And it's more of a manual than a book. Like I'm trained as an academic writer, so using huge $100,000 words and like clauses that go on this long. And so I had to relearn how to write the way that I speak, which was really intense. It takes a lot of effort to try to do all the things that your English teachers always said were wrong, because that works. That's what people actually, especially writing for the internet or writing digitally, that's extraordinarily important more than ever. So I built that online product, which is basically just an ebook that I just had to give to people more to get their feedback and say, this is what you can do to improve your life right now. And I wasn't even really selling it at first. And so I had my blog, and I realized pretty quick that no one needs another health and fitness blog. Like it's a pretty saturated market. And so like no one was reading it at first. And then I started my podcast, and that's when things really started to blow up. And like I'm a musician, so I already had, all the gizmos and knew how to turn the knobs and stuff. So the production value was something that I could lead with. And I surveyed the marketplace. I saw that there were a lot of podcasts in that like paleo ancestral health niche that were very, very technical and not that compelling to listen to. They were just like too much. And then on the other side, there are people who are just kind of like turning the mic on and hanging out and giggling the whole time and having a great time themselves, but not really delivering value. And so I wanted something in between, where it's approachable, but also very high value for people, but listenable at the same time. And so I started interviewing other folks who had lost 100+ pounds and kept it off for like 5+ years, because that's like 99% of people aren't able to do that. And so I just wanted to understand how they achieved that, and then translate that to my audience and or at least my growing audience. And after I launched that, it was the second month, or like the 6th week, I got an email from a friend of mine right after I got the bill from AWS, Amazon hosting services. And like I hosted there because it's supposed to be the cheapest place to host, or at least it was then. And I get this bill and it's like $320. And I'm like, what is this? And then like right after I got that email, my friend is just like, you're number 2 in the US right now. Did you know that? And I'm just like, what? Where is this? I had no idea that there were charts or anything like that. And so I saw the charts, and sure enough, like Jillian Michaels was number 1, and then my show was number 2. And that explains like the bandwidth that, had been pulling. So I did have to like eat that bill. Then I switched to Libsyn, which is a lot better. But yeah, and then it really just kind of scaled it from there, and focused on not selling for a long time, for at least the first 6 months, and not really pushing any products. I still to this day have no advertising, no sponsors whatsoever, and that's really important to who I am, what I stand for, as well as the whole business strategy and even growth.
Yeah. I think it's brilliant. I love what you've created. I mean, it really is amazing. You have a phenomenal show. And I'm the same way with the sponsorship and really giving the value. So I'd love for you to talk about, what do you think is the biggest reason that, from a blog to a podcast? Because for me, writing is very cumbersome. Like even trying to figure out even my own voice still. I know a lot of people struggle with that. So I'd love for you to share kind of your insights of what strategies have worked for you. And it's not even really strategies. It's really just our personalities. But what kind of has worked for you in the podcast realm that made you pop, do you believe?
Yeah. So if you compare blogging to multimedia in general, the amount of touches that you need to affect someone are dramatically reduced. So just a quick exercise for those of you who are listening out there. Like, how many blogs can you think of off the top of your head? Maybe a couple, fine. But how many blogs have you been to, in the past week or month or year? Hundreds, maybe thousands of blogs. And how many writers have you read? Like many, many, but you don't remember their names. You don't know what they look like. You don't know if they're good people or not. So unless you really know a writer, unless you're sitting down with their book, you don't really get a good feel for where they're coming from at that deep level that really resonates with you emotionally. Now, when you actually, my first book was about music and the brain and the way that language affects you emotionally. And really what music is emotional intelligence that you're transferring to someone else. And that's the exact same thing as what you do with language. The problem is with text, you're only getting a small percentage of what of that emotional content. When you hear someone's voice, you can hear if they have good energy, if they're in a good mood, if they're excited. You can't hide behind anything. Like when you, it's really interesting. I was just watching last night. It was during the Super Bowl. There were a couple of commercials, and it's just like they are reading off of a teleprompter right now so bad, and there's no way that it's not obvious to people, even if they don't know that it's a teleprompter. It's like it just doesn't come through. And so one of the things that I tried to focus on myself is just speaking from the heart, speaking from who you are. And then when people listen to it, they're like, oh, okay. Even if he's stumbling over his words, I know that it's coming from a good place. And that's what matters more than anything.
Yeah. Oh, you just brilliantly said that, because it truly is. It's so true on that epic connection that people get to have and connect with you. And it's so funny. When I was out at New Media Expo, I had like people coming up to me being like, hey, are you Kris? And they just knew my voice. Yeah, exactly. And that's how they recognized me. And they're like, oh, I've been following. And I like, so I think it's brilliant how that is able to open that up, especially for those of us that aren't quote unquote writers, because I don't sound the same when I write. So it does bring it to life. So I think it's brilliant. So I want you to talk about the music. I totally forgot about that. So I think this is I grew up classically trained with piano, and I learned through Suzuki. So I actually never got to read sheet music the first 2 years. Wow. And so the subconscious, I was really young. I was 4 years old, so I don't remember a lot of it. But the subconscious mind power that happens from that, I want you to talk about that, because I think for me, like classical music and then even just music in general pumps me up. So like before interviews or things, you have that. But I want you to talk about how that works for those maybe that haven't been into music as much, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, there are so many different reasons why music can help you level up your own performance. For me, the most important one growing up was I went through some hard stuff, and the only way that I found to deal with it was by going up to my room, cranking up my amplifier, and just playing, just shredding as loud and as hard and as fast as I could until I literally collapsed in a pool of tears. And that was the only way that I could get myself to cry. So as a musician, that's definitely something. And as a headstrong dude, like most guys are just idiots when it comes to their emotions. They have no understanding of how to access them. And, that's another conversation as to why that is. Some of it's genetic, obviously, just by being male, and some of it's societal and whatever. But what music does and what art does in general is allows you to express yourself and get something out that you're not necessarily able to put into words, or you don't feel comfortable talking to someone else about. But if you can, even if you're just listening to music, if you can cuddle up with your favorite song that does something to you, that makes you feel something, then that is that can be as good as meditation for some people. That can be as good as quitting smoking, or doing other things that are taking away a bad behavior or putting in a good one. It balances you. And there are, like, once you, especially as a kid, if you're trained as a musician as a kid, you literally have a bigger brain in certain parts. One thing that's really useful for guys is it helps their emotional communication skills. We're actually all born with brain damage as men. It severs the corpus callosum. And so, And so literally you aren't able to communicate with each half of your brain nearly as well if you're not a musician than if you are musically trained, because you need to use your whole brain when you're playing music, as well as when you're listening to it too. If you're just listening to music actively as a musician would, like in the sense where you, I like to use the metaphor of a dog. They have, their sense of smell is incredible compared to ours. And so when we smell tomato sauce bubbling on the stove, we smell tomato sauce. But a dog smells tomatoes, garlic, oregano, olive oil, and all the rest of it at the same time, because they have so much more intelligence there. And that's what a musician does when they're listening to music. They're not listening to the song necessarily, although they can. It's like, that's a cool bass line. I bet they're on the 12th fret right there. Or listening to, wow, that xylophone is slightly out of key with the sitar or whatever, and that's kind of what's going on. So if you're listening actively, then it's an enormously powerful exercise for the brain.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because for me, I kind of had ADD growing. Well, it wasn't ADD. I mean, they always say that, but just this, but the focus that it enabled me, and that's translated in all of my businesses, of being able to focus in and do that. For some people, it's sports, so it's finding in meditation, so for me, that's kind of my meditation mode. But I think it's really incredible how that works and how it all connects. It's so fun. It really is. And so Abel, I didn't talk about in the beginning, professional singer-songwriter, amazing musician himself. So really incredible insights there. So let's shift gears here. Let's talk more about your app business and how you got into that, because I think that's so interesting. You're in a lot of different areas, and you mastered a lot of different areas, and a lot of people aren't able to do that. So I'd love for you to kind of share how you got into that and what goes into that, because I don't know anything about the app world at all.
Yeah, apps are really intimidating because it's like software. How many people know about software? Not many. Or at least they don't think they do. But if you're an entrepreneur and you have your own website, then you already know a little bit about software. You know how to use it. So for me, I had a lot of success in the Amazon marketplace selling books, and had a few bestsellers, but then kind of got bored because the revenue there isn't enormous. And there are other places that seem like a better fit. And so I'd been experimenting with a few different partners to build apps. And we were breaking down like what it would take, what staff we would need, and the rest of it. And I ultimately partnered with a guy who's kind of like a project manager. He's a lot more than that, but that's his like main skill. So he's not even a developer himself, and I'm not really either. I do have a technical background in code, but I don't do any of the app coding because it's not the best use of my time. So it's more the high level stuff. And what he's able to do is come up with an idea and then make it happen in a very similar way that I do that. And so as soon as I witnessed that at first and kind of saw his projects work out that way, I'm like, all right, let's do something together. And then partnered up with a few other people to supply the content for various apps. And we're working on a bunch right now. But what I found when I originally put out the app, it was more for lead generation than it was for revenue generation. Because I put into the app ways for them to share my social media profiles, to sign up for my email list. And it also cross promotes the podcast as well. Which is kind of cool because it's a feedback loop, because people buy it from the podcast and they go back to the podcast, and like that whole ecosystem really feeds itself. But when I released the app in the first hour, it was number one in food and drink. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And in the first 2 days, we got over 1,000 5-star reviews.
That's
And
awesome.
in the first day, it hit number 6 in the world. So it was like Minecraft, Contra, like something from Warner Brothers, Mickey Mouse, and us. And Angry Birds was 45. We're just like, wow. And I hadn't even sent to one of my lists yet.
Yeah.
So it was already there. We did like many tens of thousands of customers in the first few days. And all of a sudden that was a revenue play. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty nuts, because we were at, for a $2.99 app, if you multiply it by tens of thousands, like Apple keeps 30%. But the costs are very, very small compared to the revenue that it generated, not to mention all the leads that it generated for the rest of the business. So I'm like, wow, this, like I said, I sit down with my pen and paper and I'm always trying to do a shotgun approach. And a lot of people, when they read my bio or accomplishments or awards or whatever, it's like, wow, that sounds impressive. But for every one of those things that you hear, 20 things, I've done 20 things and they fizzled out or failed completely or whatever. And so that's just one of the many, many, many things that I was doing at the same time. It's just like that one worked. But the more important thing is that I noticed that it worked. And I wasn't just like, okay, we had a good app. It's like, no, we had the number 6 app in the world. Now we need to get to work, right? And build an app business around it. Because what's the point of selling all these tiny little things all over the place, or even focusing on my music right now, or writing another book or doing whatever, when this is such a huge opportunity where we can not only do it ourselves, but publish other people. And that's what we're starting to do, because we have the first mover advantage, where it's like, now we have the platform and the mechanism and the marketing strategy that we know works. And so it's just a matter of plugging different content in there, redesigning it, and then serving that content and applying the marketing strategy to help other people who we publish really rise up the charts. And, the VCs on the West Coast are pretty pissed off that little guys like us can totally trounce them when they've been working on stuff for years. It's just being small and nimble and following those opportunities that work. That's really the secret to success, is not just doing a bunch of stuff. It's like knowing what's important and following that.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant advice. And congratulations. That's so exciting. So when did you launch that app?
That was in August, the first one.
Yeah.
And
now,
then we
what's the
launched
name of
another
that
one in November. And it was really cool. On Thanksgiving and Black Friday, both of them are cooking apps, and both of them were in the top 5 at the same time. And I'm just like,
that's awesome. How cool is that, though? I mean, it's especially with a new venture like that. What are the names of the apps?
Caveman Feast is the paleo recipes app, and then we have gluten-free desserts. And that's
a great marketplace.
Oh, it's so good. I've tried every single one of those desserts. They're amazing.
Yes, that's awesome. So is there kind of like a price range that's important with apps? Kind of like Amazon, the $2.99 to $9.99 range is where they're at?
Yeah, I'd say that that's a fair range. Like, look at what other people are doing pricing-wise. One interesting thing is that in the Android marketplace, people, I can't remember what the exact stats are, but they own like 80% of the cell phone market out there internationally. But they only do like 1/5 of the business in the App Store that Apple does. It's I can't remember if that statistic is right, but that's not really the point. Like, maybe they charge 1/5 per app of what Apple charges. So people aren't used to really paying in the Android marketplace. But we released on iOS first, and iPad, and iPhone as well, first. And then we had a lot of people just being like, I'm an Android person, like, where's my Android version? And it costs a lot to develop for Android. It costs more. It's more complicated. It was harder for us to find developers who could really do a good job there. It took time. We released it, and we got to the point where we're just like, well, no one else is really charging on Android. What are we going to do? We can't have, like, I didn't want to do some weird thing where it's like you get it for free and then you have to pay 99 cents per 10 recipes, or like something weird like that, especially when all of our Apple customers just got a deal where it's like $2.99. You get everything. You get 200 recipes. That's it. And eventually, we might have other subscriber things, or like you can pay to to get cooking videos or something, but like you get a lot of value right up front. That's what you get, and that's the deal. And so I was talking to the people at Google Play, and some other like consultants and peers who've done app stuff, and they're just like, you should make it free, or you should do that like pay per 10 recipes or something. And I'm just like, no, we're going to make a brand statement here. We're going to be in the marketplace, give them the exact same deal as Apple, and say, this is our brand, this is what we do. It kicks ass. We do awesome stuff, and you're going to love it. And if you don't, that's cool too. Don't buy it. But it's $2.99 for 200 plus recipes and a bunch of other stuff. And so that's what we decided to do, and launched in the Android marketplace. And it did okay, not nearly as well as Apple. And we're just like, okay, like, so we lost money on it. Like it was more for development than it was for the original launch, because what works in Apple doesn't necessarily work to the extent anyway as Android. And it hit top 10 in Android as well in its category. And then it was selected as best, like top 16 of all 2013. And it was selected on Apple as well around the same time. And then I started looking at the numbers around that time. And once it was featured, it started generating a lot of income, and people were really buying it in the Android marketplace. And so I thought that was cool, because now it's like we're known as a premium brand in Android, where no one else really, I mean, not many people, especially in our niche, are right now. And so I think like a big part of success isn't just like, what do the numbers say about how much money you're making? It's like, do you have a premium brand in a place where no one else has pulled that off? Because that is going to be worth a lot years from now. And I think, as a podcaster, it's really important to say, 5 years from now, when podcasts are maybe as big as network television, like saying that you have a number one podcast or even had one 5 years ago is going to be a pretty big deal. So that's a lot more important than selling on the front end.
Exactly. It is. And it's the relationships and the quality. I mean, 200 gluten-free recipes. Are you kidding me? It's hard enough for me to figure out how to make one. Right. And then for $2.99 and an app that's set up that way, it's brilliant. It really is. And it comes down to that positioning and what you want to say about your brand. So I think that, so congratulations. That's so exciting. So what's the future for Abel? What's kind of some of the new things you have on the horizon?
Yeah. A lot of cooking apps. I do have a literary agent and might be doing something there. A lot more with film. We've been focusing more on not just audio, but we have like a really cool crew here in Austin. Hopefully we're going to be doing a bunch of filming. We already have a bunch that we haven't released yet. And I think I'm just going to be out there more instead of... Especially as an entrepreneur, one of the biggest things that I do, just like the rest of us, is try to take everything right here and just like code it out yourself or do whatever you're not supposed to do, because it costs $3 an hour to do uploading, downloading, and all that other stupid stuff. So I'm really trying to focus more on the strengths that I have, which are speaking, connecting with people, having fun, interviewing, business development, and then having other people act more as the support staff and the admin, the coders and the technical, the community management type stuff, and then the people who are really working to get things done, and community service and or customer service rather, and really connecting with the enormous amount of people who are the fan base who are getting access to me. It's like one way, but I can't, like, at first I was responding to literally everyone, and I just can't do that anymore, because I wouldn't be able to do anything anymore if I did that. So it's really important to make sure that they're supported. So I've set up the staff and the team to help make that happen, and making sure that they're getting help, so that I can continue to like move forward, do great shows, write books, and create apps, and connect with people who can help change the world. And that's my like true strength, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on. So more cookbooks, another like fat loss book, more apps, and lots more shows. It's going to be awesome.
I love it. That's any Abel cooking show, or is that down the road? Okay, we'll cut that. No, I think it's great. I'm so excited for you. That's so brilliant. So anything else that you can shed light on how to create a lifestyle business that was maybe your aha moment that allowed you to really to blossom into all the things that you've created?
Yeah, I had a really cool moment with a couple of guys who were very successful a few years ago when I was first getting this off the ground, and still had my, crack paycheck that, it's
That's
like
what it
six.
is.
For me, it was the six figures, and I've been getting it for a long time. Everything was taken care of. Didn't have to worry about my bills for years. And I was only working like 10 or 15 hours a week too. So it was very difficult to get rid of that, even when I was getting traction with the rest of this. And so I had this conversation with two guys, one of whom was one of the partners on a business that was doing like 15, 20 million in the same niche as me. And I think he was only like 10 years, maybe 8 years older than me. And another guy who's about the same age, who's doing like 300,000 a year with his business. And now he does like 5 million a couple of years later. But we were just talking about, what we all did and what we were into and what the businesses looked like. And they asked me about mine. And I said, I don't know if it's ready yet. I was only making a few $100s a week or something like that at that point. Because I didn't really need to make money. I wasn't trying to. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not really sure about how to move forward or when I could switch over to this other thing. And they're just like, what, you're making a few $100s a week? Of course you're ready. Like, you've already done it. You're past that first point. You need to quit your job. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm making a few $100s a week compared to like 6 figures a year for doing almost nothing, work-wise, at least time-wise. And they're just like, no, you have proof of concept. Now all you need to do is scale it. Just need higher conversions or more traffic, or a combination of the two. But them just saying that that's how they started, and that's how, they sold a couple of books the first few months, and then like a couple more that year, and then like a few more in the days after that. And then it constantly goes like this, and they scale it. Them telling me that it was possible and that I was already there was absolutely epically important to me, because eventually it was only a few months later that so I, like 1 or 2 months after that, I said that I was done pretty much, but I would finish out, the contract that I was working on with the government. And that went on for a little while. But basically it was right after that. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And as soon as you make that mental shift, then your business just goes like 10x, 10x, 10x. And so that's what's been going on. It's been a lot more fun than having a job, I can tell you.
Yes, yeah. Well, and that shift, I think we all have that moment. Because for me, that was what I was doing with the real estate. I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I could never get, it never popped until you make that shift and do that. And just having that little bit of tangible success. A lot of people, they discredit that. And it's so powerful if you just need to get more traffic then, or have your profit funnel set up right. So I think I love it. So the last question, before we wrap up here. So if you had to start over and you had no contacts or no resources, what would you do to rebuild what you've done? What would be the steps that you would take differently maybe than how you launched the first time?
Knowing what I know now.
Exactly. You have the knowledge, but you just don't have any resources, money, contacts.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. Doing it now, I think that one of the things that's been absolutely critical to my success has been partnering with people who have the same vision or a very similar vision. And so almost every step of the process, there's been that person who, we get together, we look each other in the eye, and it's like, I like what you do, and then we're just like, let's do something. And so I think it would be that. It would be very, like, be clear about what you want to deliver to the world, what you believe in, and try to find someone who also believes in that, and see if you can't work together in some way where, maybe they're the technical guy or gal, and you're the creative one, or you focus on writing, they focus on video. It doesn't really matter. But if you can find someone who complements the skills and the natural talents that you have, whether they have a platform or not, if you can fill in your weaknesses sooner rather than later, that's going to definitely accelerate your process. Because, for me, I can't tell you how many hours I spent like rewriting plugins on WordPress that like should have worked but didn't, and like, researching which plugin would have worked better, and like switching my hosting platforms, and like integrating with ClickBank, Aweber, Infusionsoft, and like all these different plugins that work with those. Like, there's no reason that I should be spending my time that way, if I'm a good speaker, which, I've been told that I am. Like, focus on speaking. Let the tech guy do that other stuff because that's what he digs. He digs rewriting plugins for WordPress. So like find people like that, connect with them, but it really all starts with that vision. And that's so much more important than like even the skills that someone has, especially at the beginning when you're bootstrapping. You need to surround yourself with people who you think are awesome and do great work and believe in what you believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. So where can everybody find out more about you?
Easiest place to find me is fatburningman.com. And that's also a podcast. You can just type it into the Apple iTunes or Stitcher or what have you. Also, if you're more interested in the business stuff, we're redoing my whole website at abeljames.com. And that's ABEL James.com.
Excellent. And we'll have everything in the show notes and all the places that you can connect with Abel, learn about his show and all the fun new projects that he has working on. So Abel, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. And thanks for coming out and joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kris.
And I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'd love to get your feedback here for the Lifestylepreneur podcast right in iTunes. Simply leave us a 5-star and a review letting us know what you like, who you're interested in hearing more from, and what topics you really want help with in your business that I can bring on those key experts to really fine tune and help you in your business and creating the lifestyle of your dreams. And I'll be giving shout outs, so make sure you put your name and your website address if you want me to share that with the community as well. And again, thanks for listening. I'm so excited that you found the Lifestylepreneur podcast, and I can't wait to connect with you and learn more about your business as we continue to grow this community. So again, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Lifestylepreneur podcast. Again, I'm Kris Gilbertson, and I'm committed to bringing you top training from leading lifestylepreneurs all over the world to help you break through and turn your dreams into your ideal lifestyle. And make sure to join us at www.lifestyleacademy.com to receive VIP training from specific guests I interview on the show so that you can really easily start to implement what you've learned from listening. I know we're all busy, and sometimes we don't have time to listen to the entire podcast or take notes because I'm always listening on the go. So I like to call it the lifestyle cliff notes to creating your ideal business and make it really simple for you. So those will be sent via the email list. Plus, I also want to connect with you personally, and being on the Lifestyle Academy mailing list is where all the magic happens. We'll host VIP trainings once a month that we can't always bring out on the podcast with even more detailed information. And I also want to connect with you personally. I want to know what's going on in your business and what you need help with and who I can bring on to aid you in creating your ideal lifestyle. And so I'll be asking questions every once in a while that I want you to reply, and I reply back to you personally. So again, until next time, wishing you on your way to achieving all of your dreams. Talk to you soon.